Well, hi everyone, I'm Jerry Schneider, welcoming you to another edition of Art Chat TV, this time with a 30-minute documentary on the Burl and Resin creations of Mr. Andy Nedder. Now, this video first aired on the Lane County Arts Livestream Happy Hour, February of 2021, and in Andy's own words, along with some oohs and ahs from me behind the camera, shows us just how he makes magic with his wood and resin creations.
So when I get started on something like this, I'll just pick a piece of wood that I want to harvest from, something like this one here, and I'll try and figure out what I want to use on it and how I want to make my cut for using it. So usually what I'll do is I'll figure out what size I want. I'll kind of draw out the area using a compass, because most everything I do is circular anyways. So what I'll find is a spot, kind of draw an area, and I found that if I use a bright pencil, I can see my marks a lot better than if it was graphite. So there's a basic area. It's about a 6-inch diameter that you see there. I just wanted to show it to you. It's on a bias. I like doing that because I like to highlight the wood on one side of my work and the resin work on the other side. But once I've got it laid out, I'll clean it up by removing anything that's loose, primarily bark and grasses or what have you, dirt that needs to be taken off. So I'm going to cut this and prep it. So the first thing we want to do is get our ear cups on, play it safe so we don't hurt our hearing, and then we'll turn the vacuum on and cut it on the bandsaw. Piece ready to be cleaned up the rest of the way. We'll clean up these voids and we'll soak it in the cactus juice and stabilize it. For the most part, there's some areas that still need to be touched in, but it's ready to go. You can see I've got it cut on the bias. I've got some detail in it, but it just needs to be brushed in. Okay, so when I'm done getting this cleaned up, I'm going to give it a shot of air just to knock all the detritus off of it, and then we'll move it over to the oven. We're going to take all the moisture out of the wood before we move on to the next phase. This has to be basically moisture content free for us to do what we're going to do with that chamber there. So let me blow it off. We'll walk over to the oven. Dry the moisture content out of the wood. And this is a long, uninvolved process. Basically, you're going to have it in here. You're going to weigh it up on a food scale, is what I use. And it's in grams, so I'll just weigh it out here. I'll log it onto my piece of paper. And we'll place it in the oven at just above the boiling point so that water steams off. And I just keep tracking this until it quits losing weight. As you can probably see here, it takes a little while. Once you're done drying it, then you're going to go back over this way to the vacuum chamber that has our cactus juice in it, our stabilizing resin. This is it. This is a stabilizing chamber, and stabilizing resin you see in there is going to infill all the voids in this wood. So this should just fit in that chamber. I have a 6-inch diameter. That's my limit of cactus juice. See, she's floating right now. When we're done, it won't float anymore. I'm going to add some extra juice to it so that as it consumes this juice, it won't come up into the air. You see the bubbles in here? That's the air already being displaced by the resin. It's amazing how much air this spalted old maple burl has in it. So when I turn all that is air coming out of that piece of maple. Basically, you're throwing vacuum at it, so it's pulling all the air out. It's condensing the wood. When I release the vacuum, the resin will will replace the voids that the air was in. My vacuum gauge has me setting at about 28.5 inches under full vacuum. Alright, so now it's time to go have a cup of coffee and relax. Come back and check on it in a few hours. So once it's cactus juiced, we come back over to the oven here and we have to cook the cactus juice, basically bake it. It's heat activated resin. So I've got a piece in here that I did prior to us coming together here. Let me get it out for you. Piece here has been stabilized. It weighs about 2 or 3 times what the original piece weighs because of the infusion, but it's ready to be cast. I've just got a sample mold here. This is from when I was turning spheres. So I'm just going to throw one together real quick, just button it onto the platform so you understand. What I use for the spheres is I use PVC pipe, just cut to length, and then I split it. And I had some spare Lexan that I used for a base, and I can reuse these several times before they stick really hard. So I just stick it on there, hot glue gun, put a dot on here just to hold it, right there, put a dot on the back seam. We'll let that cool and solidify, and then basically all I'm going to do is button up all the seams all the way around and make it liquid tight. I will use anything that'll hold resin and the size and shape of a piece of wood that I want. So I have one made up. I'll go get it and I'll bring it back and show it to you. So this here, move this out the way, this here is basically a 6-inch planter. I just grabbed it. I knew it would hold the piece of wood that I had cut. There's the piece of wood. It'll make a good mold. I've used packing tape and a little bit of plastic just to make sure we don't have any leaks. Nice spot of hot glue. Stick it in there. Just going to hold it down for a minute. And we're ready to move on. This is some barley and rice that I use to figure out how much resin. I just use a dry capture on it. So I'm going to be pouring this in here, and then we'll figure out how much of it I use in there. My wife always tells me to leave a little extra room at the top so it's not all sloppy. I never listen though. So as you can see, got that topped up.
Yeah.
Now for the measuring device. All I'll do is I'll just dump this in here and see how much I actually use. Scrape up these runners. Level it out there and you can see about 24 ounces of resin. So that tells me what I'm going to end up putting in this thing here. It's about 24 ounces of mixed resin. Are you ready to play with some resin? Alright, well let's get to it. I'm going to dig down the things that we need. A scale, a vessel or two, the actual piece we're going to cast, some pigments and powders, some things to stir with, and I'll show you about these shortly. These are toothpicks. So yeah, we're good to go, I think. Yep. So we decided that 24 ounces was going to be the quantity that we needed for this. 24, and we're going to measure everything out in grams. So what is that? 24 times 3 is 72 or 720 in grams, 720 grams. We'll set that to 0. Sorry about that. resin. 720 is 360 divided by, or 720 divided by 2 is 360. So here we go. Part A of this Alumilite Clear Slow dries absolutely crystal clear after it's under pressure. We need 360. 360 on the dot. This has to be precise. If the mix isn't precise, the resin will not dry perfectly clear. Reset this to 0. Do another 360 with part B. 361. 1 gram is not going to hurt. Now the next thing we do is we get to mix it until it comes up clear. We do have a working time with this resin. It's about 12 minutes. Alright, so we're pretty good right there. Now we're going to pick a color. Lots of colors in here, but I think we're going to do red. And this is where the toothpick comes in handy, because you don't want to blast this with color. This color is so concentrated. Put a little dot of resin color on there, swirl it in, and mix. How's that? Does that look dark enough? You want a little bit more color? Another dot. That's as brilliant as that's going to be able to get, I think. Without becoming overwhelming. So now we're going to add a little embellishment here. This is mica powder. It always adds a little flash. It doesn't take a lot of any of these items. To make anything pop. See it there, but it looks pretty cool from this angle. Now, I'm going to add a little highlight. Use a different mica powder. Okay, so now it's time to pour. I have most of it in there, and now I'm going to put the embellishment in. Give it a little bit of a stir to get some nice pattern in there, and pour the rest of the resin in. Quick stir. And we're ready to pressure pot this. This resin must be worked under pressure once it's poured. It helps shrink the air bubbles and clarify it as we're going. Basically, this is just to debubble it. Get the air out of it. stay under pressure for about 2.5 to 3 hours. When it's done, you'll be able to pick it out of here, peel the mold off of it, and get it set up for turning on the lathe. Okay, after we cast and it sat in the pressure pot curing out, so now it's time to peel this open and see what we ended up with. So this will take a few minutes to open up, it's no big deal. You can see I used packing tape, hot glue. There's that piece of Lexan I was talking about, and a piece of 4-inch PVC pipe that I used to cast this in. So here we go. There's the wrap. Looks like we've got good penetration. A lot of times I'll just knock the bottom off with a hammer, just like that. And sometimes we have stubborn molds. There's a half. There it is. And it looks like the casting came out pretty good. So now we get to prep this to put it on the lathe. It involves sanding and putting a sacrificial plug on here to mount up to the chuck. Alright, well, let's take it out of the clamp and mount it up on the lathe. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take this piece and mount it up on the lathe, we'll true it up, and then we'll start putting some form to it. So I use my rest here as a guide. I follow it along here as I hand turn it to see how far off it really is. And I make minor adjustments. Use my finger as a gauge. That's actually not too bad. I think I'll live with that. Not bad, not bad. I'm going to put a face shield on for safety, and we'll get to cutting. Look and see where we're at. You can see it's starting to true up. When we get it cut completely around this, that will be true. Well, I think we're at a point where we can start putting some shape to this. So let's get to it. sand this down. We're going to try and get it close to a finish so that we don't have to come back and work too hard on hollow form. So here we go. I'll start with 100 grit, work my way all the way up to, well, I'll probably start with a 60 grit, work my way all the way up to about a 600 grit. I'm going to wash it down with some denatured alcohol just so that we can see where we're at and remove some dust before I move on to the next sanding phase, which is 400 to 600 grit. This will kind of show you what it's going to look like when it's finished too.
Yeah.
Sometimes, when I get to this next phase, depending on what I'm working with, I'll wet sand with the 600 because it is wet or dry, and I'll go down to 1500 with the sanding. In this particular case, I'm going to stick with the dry sanding at a lower speed. I just don't want to put any water on this wood this particular time. I think we're about there. I'm going to give it a quick wipe with the alcohol and then we'll go to polish. There we go. This is what they call cut and polish. It's a friction polish. It's also got some sanding qualities to it for a fine finish. Voila!
Wow, look at that.
We get to get inside it and hollow it out, and these walls will become translucent. Okay, so now we're going to part the lid off of this. I like using my Carter sphere tool for holding the lid in place while I'm doing the parting. There's the lid, been parted off. Just needs a little finishing on the inside and it's ready for decapping that. Next step is to get inside this piece of wood and hollow it out. I'm going to get down to within a ½ inch of the bottom of this with this Forstner bit. That'll give me a place to start to get the form cleared. Last check. I think we're there. Yes, we are. now that we've got it turned, we've got it hollowed out, I'm going to go ahead and sand the interior of this just like we did on the outside. That's what she's going to look like. Okay, this is what we're going to use to put the initial shine on. It's called Sheila Shine. It's an Australian product. Now that it's applied, we'll go ahead and polish it up. Carefully, of course. Yes, what we're going to do is going to take it right off the leg.
Okay.
We're in the final phase. We're going to put the buffing wheels on, run it through the rouge, the diamond cut, and the carnauba wax wheels, and put our final shine on everything. I'm going to dress the wheels before I get started, so I won't have to do it in the middle of the process. That's the rouge. This is the diamond polish. It's the next step down from that. This is like ultra fine polishing chrome powder. This is pure carnauba wax, which will be going on the last.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and there's a waxy topping on this that will actually wipe off when we're done. You'll actually see that.